Good Tuesday, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's daily Bible reading for September the 27th. Today, we're reading together in Revelation chapter 14. It's going to conclude this little interlude from chapters 12, 13, and 14 that focus on picturing the story of God overcoming his enemies. It begins with Israel and with the Messiah coming from Israel, and it details all the struggles that the people of the Messiah have to endure, the enemy characters being the dragon and the two beasts. And then we see the Lamb reappearing and the Lamb having victory. We're going to see that today within this particular chapter. We're going to see the Lamb appearing with his number of the saved, and then we're going to see the Son of Man appear and the harvest that's going to take place. So really, if you're looking, you're trying to understand this section of Revelation the best, again, begin in chapter 12. Excuse me. Begin in chapter 12, read it together, read chapters 12, 13, and 14 together. Read them almost as their own little kind of movie together, I guess you might say it. Kind of follow the story and recognize that this all goes together and all focuses on God having victory over his enemies and how those who belong to him are going to have victory over their enemies as well. It's written in this way and in this symbolic way because that's what apocalypses are. That is the one of the defining details of what apocalyptic literature does, and that is exactly what this Revelation is. It is apocalyptic literature. It would have been very familiar to the Jews, and we need to try to understand it from their perspective first and foremost before we try to find the applications or the modern understanding for us. We cannot come to this text and read it with 21st century Western eyes, or we might end up in crazy left field, belonging to some very complicated and convoluted end time system that I just don't believe, number one, is necessary from this text, and number two, I don't believe this text would naturally lead us to anyways. So remember, it is an apocalypse. It is a prophecy. It's from God to mankind, giving his perspective. And then it is to a specific people at a specific place, for a specific purpose and a specific time. And especially for these Christians who were enduring very severe direct persecution, it would have been very necessary for them and very encouraging for them to see how God is going to win in the end, and how God has the ability to preserve them and to hold on to them until it is the time for the judgment to take place. Excuse me. I think that's what we're going to see here within this particular chapter of chapter 14. Is I think we do have a picture of the last judgment whenever Jesus returns and renders judgment upon the earth. I think that's the occasion that is being written of here within this particular text. I believe that because of the harvesting imagery that is mentioned here, kind of the finality of some of the judgments that are mentioned here as well. I think all that leads us then to this being a picture of final judgment. But the question is, though, well, if this is final judgment, if this is a picture of final judgment, then why is it in chapter 14 whenever we still got a number of chapters to go? Why would you put the end in the middle of the writing? And the answer for that is because Revelation is not written in a linear fashion, I don't believe. It's not written, the first chapter is the beginning, then last chapter is the end. I think it goes in cycles and reimagines various things in different ways. Again, for the purpose of encouraging those who were engaged in a very real and direct persecution at the time. And yet, again, there are very, very strong and important lessons and principles for us to recognize and consider as well. So with all that said, let me go ahead and get the text up on the screen for us of Revelation chapter 14. Revelation chapter 14, we have the 144,000 showing up again. We saw them a few chapters ago. So if you want some more detail on them, you might go check out that reading from, let me double check here. We first saw the 144,000 in chapter 7. And those here in chapter 7, we talked about this is working off of chapter 16, where we have the day of the Lord type of judgment imagery, and those who are suffering under the hand of the day of the Lord for their sins. The question is, well, who can stand against the Lord, or who can stand in his judgments? And the answer is, well, those who have been sealed by the Spirit, those who belong to him, those who belong to Israel, who belong to the 144,000. Those are the ones who are going to be able to stand. Well, here we have them here showing up again. They have stood, they have persevered, and now here is the Lord coming to redeem them and to vindicate them for their perseverance and their trust in him. So Revelation chapter 14, verse number 1, then I looked. Here's John saying, I looked, and there was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Which, remember what we just talked about yesterday in chapter 13, where we talked about those who had the mark of the beast, those who, excuse me, who had allowed themselves to be aligned with the enemy of God, those who said, I don't belong to God, I belong to the enemy. I'm going to ride with him, because I think he has the best thing going. Well, we have those at the end of chapter 13, and now here in chapter 14, we have the opposite of that. We have those who are belonging to God and who have pledged allegiance and fealty to him. So these are the 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Verse number 2, John says, I heard a sound from heaven like the sound of cascading waters and like the rumbling of loud thunder. The sound I heard was like harpists playing on their harps. They sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders, but no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who had not defiled themselves with women, since they remain virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were redeemed from humanity as the first fruits for God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. Then I saw another angel flying high overhead with the eternal gospel to announce to the inhabitants of the earth, to every nation, tribe, and language and people. He spoke with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship the one who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. And a second angel followed, saying, it has fallen. Babylon the Great has fallen. She has made all the nations drink the wine of her sexual immorality, which brings wrath. And a third angel followed them and spoke with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, which is poured full strength into the cup of his anger. He will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the sight of the holy angels and in the sight of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will go up forever and ever. There is no rest, day or night, for those who worship the beast and its image, or anyone who receives the mark of its name. This calls for endurance from the saints who keep God's commands and their faith in Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven saying, write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so they will rest from their labors, since their works follow them. Then I looked, and there was a white cloud, and one like the Son of Man was seated on the cloud with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hands. Another angel came out of the temple, crying out in a loud voice to the one who was seated on the cloud, use your sickle and reap, for the time to reap has come, since the harvest of the earth is ripe. So the one seated on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Then another angel, who had a sharp sickle, came out from the temple in heaven. Yet another angel who had authority over fire came from the altar, and he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, use your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the vineyard of the earth, because its grapes have fallen ripened. So the angel swung his sickle at the earth and gathered the grapes from the vineyard of the earth, and he threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. Then the press was trampled outside the city. The blood flowed out of the press up to the horses' bridles for about 180 miles. And that concludes Revelation chapter 14. Excuse me. So again, the imagery here is of those who have been faithful to God. That's verses 1 through 5. And then we have the proclamations of these angels here who are crying out. Again, the hour of his judgment has come. That seems very, very clear. And what we have here is a moment of judgment, but it doesn't just seem to be a moment of judgment. It seems to be the judgment, because notice, it has fallen. Babylon the Great has fallen. But hold on a second, you might say. I thought we were talking about the time of Rome. Again, many people believe this was written the latter portion of the first century, around 90 BC or 90 AD or so. Now, if that's the case, how is this talking about Babylon? Well, you have to remember that Babylon is a moniker that is given to anyone really who opposes the will of God and who stands opposed to God in every way. I think that goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. That's where this name originates. Babylon originates at the Tower of Babel, and that was a time, of course, whenever people were opposed to God, they were not following his will, therefore he confused the language and scatters them. And from that point on, we see this name Babylon being used to indicate those who are opposed to God. So at the time of what's going on here, yes, it was Rome specifically, but Rome was standing in the place of Babylon. Rome was behaving as a Babylon. And here the idea is that, don't worry, Rome's going to fall just as every other Babylon is going to fall. Those who oppose God in Rome are going to fall just as all of the other Babylons have fallen. And the truth is that Babylon still exists today. Babylon exists today in the fact that there are many forces and peoples and such that oppose God, and they stand as well in the form of Babylon. And anyone who belongs to that, anyone who worships the beast or its image or receives a mark on his forehead, they are going to be judged in that way. So again, those who align themselves with those who are opposed to God, they're going to experience God's wrath whenever he comes back in judgment. That's really the main idea we need to keep in our minds here, that if we fit in with those who are mentioned in chapter 13, who have the mark of the beast, which is simply a signifying idea of this is who you belong to. If you receive that, then yeah, you're going to suffer. You're going to drink the wine of God's wrath. You're going to be tormented in fire and sulfur. The smoke of the torment will go forever and ever. There is no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or anyone who receives the mark of his name. That's what you're going to experience if you refuse God, if you oppose God, if you stand against God. This is what you're going to experience. With this being the reality, then verse 12, this calls for endurance from the saints who keep God's commands and their faith in Jesus. So you need to hold on. You need to hold on, because judgment is coming, and in the minds of John, it's coming quickly. So be ready, endure for that day. So here is that day. Verse 14, there's a white cloud, there's a son of man there. He has the crown on his head, he has a golden sickle. Here's the angel coming out of the temple and telling the one who's seated on the throne, telling the son of man, it's time to harvest. Well, why is an angel commanding Jesus that's time to go harvest? Well, think back to the Gospels, that Jesus even said, nobody knows the time, not angels, not even the Son of Man, but only the Father knows. It seems that the Father has told the Son, now it's time to go reap. It's time to go collect the harvest. Go collect those who have produced a harvest for you. So those who have been faithful are going to be harvested into life, and those who have been unfaithful, those who have rebelled, those who have rejected God, are going to be those who are thrown into the fire with the shaft. And that is the basic imagery of what we have going on here in chapter 14. Again, to get the picture as a whole, begin reading in chapter 12, read chapter 13, read chapters 12, 13, and 14 together as a collective unit, and recognize this is simply one cycle of the way that God is expressing this perspective to John through Jesus, that this is this revelation, and it is in this type of writing that the Jews would understand very well. They would be encouraged by what they're seeing here, and it would motivate them to remain strong in their faiths, because eventually, at the right time, God is going to harvest them. And up until that time, he's going to sustain them, and he's going to help them to persevere. They simply needed to do, as verse number 12 says, they needed to endure. Let's see verse number 12 again. This calls for endurance from the saints who keep God's commands and their faith in Jesus. Are we doing that? Are we striving to endure? Are we striving to keep God's commands? Are we striving to keep our faith in Jesus? The reality is, you might remember a couple months back, I guess it was, I did a lesson where I talked about the idea of the end being near, and how people look at that again in a linear fashion, as if we're moving toward the end, when maybe a better way to understand that is that we're right on the edge of the end, and we're moving right along the edge. If this is the end, we're moving right along the edge of the end. And at any time, whenever God says it's done, all it takes is the word, and boom, we're there. So it's not like we're moving towards, we're getting closer every day. It's not that we're getting closer to the end every day, because remember, God doesn't deal in time. We do. But the reality is, we're not getting closer to the end. We are there at the end. But we just need to be prepared for whenever God says the word. So for us, again, our thought is we need to endure. We need to keep God's commands. We need to maintain our faith in Jesus. If we're doing that, we will be harvested joyfully in the end. And that is the message here of Revelation 14, but not only Revelation 14, but also Revelation 12, 13, and 14. Tomorrow, as we continuing our reading, we'll be reading the short chapter of chapter 15, which is the preparation for the bowls, this next cycle of apocalyptic language and images that are going to be delivered to us through the Revelation. We'll be looking at that tomorrow in chapter 15. Again, thanks for tuning in today, guys. Hope you have a great rest of your day. May God bless you in all that you do. If you are here on the Facebook page, watching this, I encourage you to go scroll down and check out some of the things that we have going on within the church. Some people have posted prayer requests. Let's be praying for them. I'm pretty sure Caden and Zach both are on their way down to Florida to do work for the hurricane that's coming, Hurricane Ian, that's going to hit here in the next couple of days. They're on their way down there. And hopefully it will not be a long trip for them, but depending on the severity of the storm will depend on how long they're down there. So please be praying for Alex and Mia and them while they're away. And hopefully they'll be back soon. But again, lots going on within our church family, lots for us to be praying for. And I encourage you to really take the time to be in prayer for our brothers and sisters and our friends. Again, thanks for tuning in.